"Please, I'll be your wife," cried the Apache widow. The cowboy's next move stunned everyone. The sun had barely risen over the dusty plains when the small frontier town began to stir. Horses stamped and whinnied outside the wooden saloons and trading posts, while the smell of fresh bread and strong coffee drifted through the air. Life here was hard, but it was honest work, and the townspeople had grown used to the rhythm of this rugged land. Among them was a cowboy known for his skill and courage. He had seen more hardships than most men could imagine, but he carried himself with a quiet dignity, riding alone for days across the endless fields, always ready to help when needed, yet always keeping his own heart carefully guarded. On this particular morning, something unusual caught his eye. A woman appeared at the edge of town, moving cautiously down the main street. She was alone, and yet she carried herself with a quiet strength that immediately drew attention. Her dark hair was tied back simply, and her eyes, wide and alert, told a story of loss and resilience. She was an Apache widow, having survived the tragedy of losing her husband, and now seeking refuge in a town where few outsiders felt welcome. The townspeople stopped their chores to glance at her, whispering behind cupped hands. They knew who she was, or at least her reputation. She had come from a nearby reservation, known to carry the weight of her people's struggles. Some townsfolk were wary, unsure of how to treat a woman who had experienced so much pain. Others were curious, wanting to see how she would adapt to the strange ways of the frontier town. The cowboy watched from the porch of the trading post. He had seen many people pass through the town, but something about her presence felt different. There was a determination in her step, a combination of fear and courage that made him pause. He noticed the way she scanned the area, her gaze moving carefully from person to person, assessing danger and safety with equal attention. Her posture was steady, but her hands occasionally trembled when she adjusted the strap of the bag she carried. For a moment he considered ignoring her. It was not uncommon for strangers to come and go without anyone taking much notice. But something inside him stirred, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Maybe it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the echo of memories he had tried to bury long ago. Either way, he found himself walking down the steps of the trading post, making his way toward her. As he approached, she turned and looked at him directly. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the air between them seemed to hold a tension that neither had expected. She did not look away, and he did not avert his gaze. For the cowboy, it was a rare moment of recognition, seeing someone who had faced pain and hardship and yet refused to be broken by it. For her, the steady presence of a man who seemed untouchable by the chaos around him brought a strange sense of reassurance. She stopped in front of him, her voice quiet but firm. "Please," she began, hesitating for just a moment before gathering the courage to speak again. "I'll be your wife." The words hung in the air, startling in their honesty and boldness. The cowboy's eyes widened slightly, though his face remained calm. Such a declaration was unheard of in this town, especially from a woman who had endured so much.
The townspeople, noticing the exchange, began to murmur among themselves, their curiosity and surprise growing with every passing second.
The cowboy's first instinct was disbelief. He had spent years alone, relying only on himself and the wide-open plains. The idea that someone would offer herself so openly and so suddenly was foreign to him. Yet as he looked into her eyes, he sensed something genuine, something beyond fear or desperation. There was a sincerity that could not be faked, a bravery that demanded acknowledgement. He stayed silent for a long moment, simply observing her. The widow shifted slightly, unsure whether she had made a mistake by speaking so boldly. Around them, life continued. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the distant laughter of children playing, the creaking of wagon wheels on the dirt road. But in that small space, the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them. The townspeople watched in astonishment. Some whispered that she had lost her mind, while others wondered if the cowboy would react with anger or amusement. Yet he did neither. Instead, he maintained a calm composure, as if weighing every possible outcome before speaking. He knew that whatever decision he made at that moment could change both of their lives forever. The widow, sensing the tension, took a small step closer. Her voice softened.
Breath. I have nowhere else to go. I only ask for safety, for companionship, for someone to trust. There was no pride in her tone, only vulnerability and hope.
She had faced dangers before, from the loss of her family to the uncertainty of life on the frontier, and yet she had found the courage to ask for what she needed most. The cowboy felt a strange mix of emotions: surprise, caution, and a growing admiration. He had always respected courage when he saw it, but this was unlike anything he had encountered. Here was a woman who had endured pain yet still dared to reach out, asking for a chance to form a bond in a world that often offered none. For several minutes neither of them spoke. The town held its collective breath, sensing the importance of the moment. The widow fidgeted slightly, gripping the strap of her bag tighter, while the cowboy's eyes never left hers. He thought about the life he had built, the solitude he had grown accustomed to, and the possibilities that lay before him. There was risk, certainly, but also the chance for connection and understanding that he had not felt in years. Finally he spoke, his voice steady and measured. "You're brave to speak so openly," he said. "But life out here is not easy. It will not be simple. And it will not be safe." His words were a warning, yet they carried no judgment, only honesty. The widow nodded, acknowledging the truth in his statement. She had known hardship all her life, and she understood that this was not a promise of comfort or ease. It was a request for trust. The tension in the air slowly began to ease, replaced by a quiet curiosity and cautious hope. The cowboy extended a hand, not in immediate agreement, but in acknowledgement. It was a gesture that conveyed understanding, a small bridge between two people from very different worlds. The widow hesitated briefly before taking it, and in that simple act, an unspoken connection began to form. Around them, life slowly returned to normal. The blacksmith resumed his work. Children's laughter continued, and the wagons rolled past. But in the hearts of the cowboy and the widow, something had shifted. They were no longer strangers passing through the same town. They were two people beginning a story that neither of them could have predicted. A story born of courage, honesty, and the fragile hope of trust. That morning, under the vast sky of the frontier, a single moment had the power to change everything. It was a moment filled with uncertainty and possibility, fear and courage, doubt and hope. The cowboy knew that whatever choice he made next would matter, not just for him, but for the widow who had dared to ask, and for the life they might build together. And so, as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the dusty streets, the town watched silently, knowing that a story was beginning, one that would be remembered not for its simplicity, but for the bravery of a woman who spoke her truth, and the man who had the wisdom to truly listen. The town seemed to hold its breath after the widow's bold words. The cowboy stood silently, the morning sun casting a long shadow behind him, and yet he made no immediate decision. Around them life carried on as usual, but the tension in the air lingered, like the calm before a storm. The widow, sensing the weight of the moment, lowered her gaze briefly, trying to hide the mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. But she had spoken her truth, and now the outcome rested entirely on a man whose life had always been guided by caution and solitude. Some townspeople began to whisper, but a few men leaned against the wooden posts of the saloon, shaking their heads in disbelief.
Did she really just say that? One muttered, his voice barely audible.
Psst. Others looked at the cowboy, waiting to see how he would respond. He had a reputation for being unshakable, a man who could face a wild herd of cattle or a sudden bandit attack without hesitation. Yet even they knew that words carried a power of their own, and this moment was proving that. The widow's voice broke the silence once more. "I am not asking for your wealth," she said, steadying herself. "I am not asking for comfort or promises. I only ask for someone who will stand by me, someone who will see me as a person, not just as a widow or an outsider." Her words carried an honesty that was impossible to ignore. The cowboy's eyes softened, and for the first time that day he felt the stirrings of something he had thought long buried: empathy, perhaps even the faintest spark of hope.
He took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Life on the frontier was rarely simple.
Invitation. Danger lurked around every corner, from sudden storms to wild animals, from bandits to harsh winters that could claim the unprepared. To accept the widow's request meant more than simply agreeing to live together. It meant sharing in her burdens, facing dangers side by side and risking his carefully constructed solitude for something uncertain. Yet as he studied her, he saw courage that mirrored his own in ways he had not expected. Her resilience in the face of tragedy reminded him of the days he had spent learning to survive on his own, relying on nothing but skill, wits, and determination. She had lost much, yet she continued forward with strength and dignity. That strength, he realized, was worth more than any comfort or safety he could offer her. The widow waited, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, watching the cowboy closely. She was not demanding an immediate answer, but her presence was a silent plea for acknowledgement. She understood that he was weighing the decision carefully, and she respected his need for thought. Still, her heart beat quickly with anticipation, and she could not hide the tremor in her voice as she spoke again. "Please, I do not want to be a burden. I only wish to find a place where I can belong." The cowboy's mind raced with possibilities. Despair.
He thought about the practical challenges, where they would live, how they would manage daily life, and how the townspeople would react. He knew prejudice and suspicion ran deep in the town, and accepting her request could bring criticism or even danger.
Yet he also understood that courage sometimes demanded action, and empathy often required risk. To turn her away without thought would not only break her heart, it would leave both of them deprived of a chance to form a bond that might change their lives forever. "Bay," he finally spoke, his voice calm but deliberate. "Life here is not easy."
You should know that.
His words were not meant to discourage but to set a foundation of honesty. The widow nodded, fully aware of the truth in his statement. She had experienced hardship before and had learned that life's challenges could not be ignored or avoided. Yet she also believed that courage and determination could shape a better path, even in the harshest conditions. The cowboy stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the dusty ground. "If I were to agree, it would not be because I feel obligated. It would be because I believe you are brave enough to face life alongside me, not behind me or in fear." There was no judgment in his tone, only clarity and honesty. The widow's eyes widened slightly at his words. It was more than she had hoped for. It was recognition of her strength, an acknowledgement that she could be seen as a partner rather than a dependent. Bells. Around them, whispers continued to ripple through the town. Some were skeptical, wondering how such a union could succeed. Others were intrigued, curious to see how two very different people might come together in a place where survival often depended on toughness and self-reliance. Despite the murmurs, the cowboy paid little attention to the opinions around him. He had learned long ago that the choices that mattered most were rarely approved by everyone else. The widow, encouraged by his words, allowed herself a small but genuine smile. It was the first sign of hope she had shown since arriving in town, and it did not go unnoticed. The cowboy felt a subtle shift in the air, as if the tension that had surrounded them moments ago had softened just enough to allow possibility to enter. Yet the decision was far from final. The cowboy knew that acceptance required more than words. It required trust, patience, and time. He could see the fear behind her courage, the uncertainty behind her boldness, and he understood that building a partnership meant addressing those doubts with care and respect. He did not offer her immediate assurance because he knew the importance of pacing such matters carefully. Instead, he suggested a small step forward. "Stay here for a few days," he said. "I will help you find work, a place to stay, and ensure that you are safe. Then we will see if we can find a way forward together." His offer was practical, yet it carried the promise of potential partnership, leaving the widow both relieved and anxious. She had asked for connection, and while he had not agreed outright, he had opened a door that had seemed firmly closed just moments before. Bah! The widow nodded, her hands clasped more firmly in front of her.
I understand, she said quietly.
Bess, I will wait. I will do whatever is needed to earn your trust. There was no plea in her tone now, only determination and resolve. She had learned that actions often spoke louder than words, and she was willing to show the cowboy the strength of her character through deeds rather than promises. Over the next few days, the cowboy observed her closely. He noticed how she interacted with the townspeople, her willingness to learn their ways, and her ability to maintain dignity in the face of doubt or suspicion. She worked hard at the general store, helped with chores, and even assisted in caring for some of the younger children in town who had no one else to watch over them.
With every action, she demonstrated patience, courage, and intelligence, the very qualities he had hoped to see.
For the cowboy, each passing day strengthened his sense of connection. He found himself thinking about her in ways he had not anticipated, considering the possibilities of a shared life, and recognizing the rare combination of resilience and kindness that she brought with her. He also noticed small details. The way she smiled when she discovered something new, the care she took in her work, and the way her eyes reflected both wisdom and vulnerability. These observations deepened his understanding of who she was, not just as a widow or outsider, but as a person deserving of respect and consideration.
The townspeople observing these interactions began to soften their skepticism.
They saw the widow's dedication, her respect for the community, and the growing bond between her and the cowboy. Murmurs of doubt slowly shifted into quiet admiration as people recognized that courage and sincerity could transcend prejudice and suspicion. Even those who had been most critical could not deny the strength of character she displayed, and the cowboy's thoughtful attention only reinforced the sense that something meaningful was unfolding. By the end of the week, the widow had earned a place not just in the town, but in the cowboy's consideration. Their interactions had moved beyond caution and observation into moments of shared laughter, small acts of kindness, and mutual respect. They discovered common values, honesty, resilience, and a willingness to face life's hardships without complaint. These shared principles laid the groundwork for a deeper connection, one that neither had expected, but both now felt was worth exploring. As the sun set on the seventh day, casting golden light across the town, the cowboy and the widow stood together outside the trading post. The quiet hum of the town evening surrounded them, the clatter of tools being cleaned, children's laughter fading into the distance, and the distant cry of a lone coyote.
In that moment, there was no need for words.
The understanding between them was clear. The future was uncertain, the path ahead difficult, but there was a mutual willingness to try, to learn, and to see what could grow from this beginning. And so, the widow's bold proposal had not been met with immediate acceptance, nor had it been dismissed. Instead, it had initiated a process of observation, patience, and mutual understanding. It had tested courage, judgment, and the ability to recognize value in another person beyond first impressions. In the quiet of the frontier evening, a fragile yet hopeful bond began to take shape, one built on respect, honesty, and the recognition that even in the harshest conditions, human connection could flourish. The cowboy looked at her and saw not just a widow but a partner, someone willing to face life's dangers alongside him, someone whose courage mirrored his own, and someone whose presence could transform solitude into shared strength. The widow, in turn, looked at him and saw not just a solitary cowboy, but a man capable of empathy, thoughtfulness, and honor. Though the town might still whisper, though challenges would surely come, they both understood that a new story had begun. One that would test them, shape them, and perhaps in time define them both, passed slowly. On the frontier, each one blending into the next with the steady rhythm of work, chores, and the endless stretch of plains. The cowboy rode early in the morning, checking on his cattle, repairing fences, and keeping an eye out for any trouble that might wander into the area. He had always preferred this solitary life, the quiet of the open land offering him a sense of peace he rarely found among people. But lately his thoughts had been interrupted by the presence of the widow. She had settled into the town, working at the general store and helping where she could. Her skills were impressive. She was quick, intelligent, and attentive to detail. Yet it was not her work that captured the cowboy's attention so much as the way she carried herself. She moved with quiet confidence, yet never demanded recognition. She helped the townspeople without complaint, listening carefully to their problems and offering solutions when she could. Every day he observed her, taking note of her resilience, her courage, and the way she managed to maintain dignity despite the whispers and occasional stares from the town. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon casting golden and orange hues across the plains, the cowboy rode back from checking his cattle. Dust clung to his boots and the brim of his hat shaded tired eyes, but he carried a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. He dismounted near the trading post, where the widow was arranging supplies, her movements precise and deliberate. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. "Good evening," he said simply. There was no ceremony in his words, but the calm in his voice carried a weight that made her heart skip a beat. "Evening," she replied, her tone steady, though her fingers lingered on the edge of the counter as if seeking grounding. There was an unspoken tension between them, a combination of anticipation and caution, as if both were aware of the fragile bridge forming between their lives. The cowboy leaned slightly against the wooden post of the trading post, shading his eyes against the fading sunlight. "I've been thinking," he began, pausing as he measured his words carefully, "about what you asked, and about what it would mean for both of us." He glanced toward the horizon, his mind wandering over memories of long rides, solitary nights, and the harsh lessons of survival on the plains. Life is not easy here. It never has been. And if I agree to what you asked, it both won't be just words. We will need to rely on each other, and sometimes that will be harder than either of us expects. The widow nodded. Barris. She had anticipated this. She knew the cowboy would not take such a request lightly. Best. She had learned through hardship that nothing worth having came without effort or patience. "I understand," she said softly. "I don't expect promises. I only ask for the chance to show that I can stand beside you, and that together we can face what comes." Her sincerity struck the cowboy in a way he had not expected. He had spent years avoiding close relationships, believing that solitude was safer than companionship. He had seen too many lives end abruptly, too many promises broken, and too many people disappear into the harsh landscape without warning. But here was a woman who had already faced immense loss and yet remained willing to step forward, to trust, to try again. Her courage made him reconsider the walls he had built around his own heart. Over the next few days, the cowboy and the widow spent time together in practical matters. He showed her the routines of the land, how to check the cattle, mend fences, and read the weather signs that the plains offered. She learned quickly, her determination evident in every action. Mistakes were made, as they always were, but they were met with patience and guidance rather than frustration. With each passing day, the cowboy began to see the widow not just as someone seeking protection, but as a capable partner, someone whose strength complemented his own. During these days, they also shared quiet moments. Early mornings brought them together on the wide open plains, where the air was cool and the only sounds were the distant calls of birds and the soft rustle of the wind through the tall grass. Sometimes the cowboy would speak of his past, though he kept the details sparse, revealing just enough to share his experiences without burdening her. Bet. She, in turn, spoke of her own journey, the loss of her husband, and the challenges she had faced growing up in a world that often saw her as less than she was. These conversations created a bond deeper than words alone could express. They learned to trust one another, not just in moments of danger, but in the small, everyday tasks that required patience, cooperation, and mutual respect. The cowboy found himself laughing quietly at her observations and insights, moments of lightness that had been absent from his life for too long. The widow, in turn, felt a sense of security she had not known since before her loss, a rare feeling of being seen and understood for who she truly was. Yet, even as their relationship grew, the cowboy remained cautious. Probability. He knew that frontier life was unpredictable and that danger could appear without warning. One afternoon, while riding across the plains to check on distant cattle, he encountered a sudden thunderstorm. Dark clouds rolled in quickly, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the landscape in sharp, fleeting bursts. The cowboy worked swiftly to guide his horse to shelter, recalling the lessons he had learned from years of surviving the harsh weather. The widow, having followed him cautiously on horseback, arrived shortly after the storm began. She had attempted to keep up, determined to prove herself capable and resilient. Seeing her struggle against the wind and rain, the cowboy acted quickly, guiding her horse alongside his own and shouting instructions over the roar of the storm. Together, they found temporary shelter under a rocky outcrop, their clothes soaked and faces streaked with mud, but alive and safe. In that moment, a new level of trust formed between them. The cowboy saw the widow's determination firsthand, her courage in the face of danger, her quick thinking, and her refusal to give up even when conditions were difficult. He realized that she was not simply relying on him for protection. She was willing to face challenges alongside him, ready to act when needed. And the widow, seeing the cowboy's calm and resourceful handling of the situation, felt reassured that he was a person she could truly depend on.
Back in town, their partnership began to draw attention.
The townspeople noticed how the widow had adapted to life in the community, how she worked diligently and carried herself with quiet confidence. They also noticed the cowboy's patience, guidance, and growing attention toward her. While some still whispered doubts, others began to acknowledge the value of courage, determination, and mutual respect. Slowly, the town's skepticism softened, replaced by curiosity and cautious admiration.
The cowboy and the widow spent evenings planning for the future. They discussed practical matters, where she would live, how they would manage supplies, and what challenges they might face during harsh winters.
Each discussion revealed more about their characters, her resourcefulness and adaptability, his thoughtfulness and foresight. They learned to anticipate each other's needs and to offer support without overstepping boundaries. Through these moments, a deeper connection formed, one built on understanding, trust, and shared responsibility. One night, as they sat together watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky, the cowboy spoke quietly. "I've lived a long time alone," he admitted, his voice low but steady. "I thought I was safer that way. But I see now that life can be shared, that trust and courage can create something stronger than solitude."
He paused, looking at the widow with a rare openness in his eyes.
I do not know what the future holds, but I know that I want to face it with someone I can respect and rely on. The widow's eyes glistened with quiet emotion. I feel the same, she said softly. I have faced loss and hardship, but I also know the value of connection, of standing beside someone who sees me as I am, not just as what I have endured. In that simple exchange, words and feelings merged, forming the foundation of a partnership that was neither rushed nor forced, but natural and grounded in mutual respect. As the weeks turned into months, the cowboy and the widow continued to learn from each other. They faced small challenges, from unexpected weather changes to disputes among townsfolk, and each obstacle only strengthened their bond.
They celebrated small victories together, like a successful cattle drive or the completion of a challenging repair, and learned to navigate disagreements with patience and understanding.
Through these experiences, they discovered that partnership was not about ownership or control, but about support, trust, and the willingness to face life's difficulties together. By the end of the season, it was clear that something extraordinary had formed between them. The cowboy, once entirely self-reliant and solitary, now looked forward to sharing his days with someone who complemented his strengths and helped him grow in ways he had not imagined. The widow, once a grieving and uncertain presence in the town, had found a sense of purpose, belonging, and hope in a partnership that respected her courage and resilience. But their connection was no longer just a quiet understanding. It had become a living bond, forged through shared experience, mutual respect, and the courage to face uncertainty together. Though the frontier remained as harsh and unpredictable as ever, they had found in each other a source of strength, comfort, and companionship that made the challenges of the world easier to bear. And so, as the sun set over the plains once more, the cowboy and the widow stood side by side, looking out at the horizon. They had faced storms, uncertainty, and the judgments of others, yet they had emerged with a deeper understanding of one another. What had begun as a bold plea for protection had transformed into a partnership built on courage, trust, and shared resilience, a foundation strong enough to face whatever the future might bring. The days grew longer and the frontier town settled into its usual rhythm, yet something had begun to shift. The cowboy and the widow had spent countless hours together, working side by side, learning from each other, and sharing quiet moments in the vast expanse of the plains. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a sense of mutual respect and trust that had grown steadily, almost imperceptibly, but it was undeniable. The townspeople began to notice it too. Their glances were softer, their whispers more curious than critical. It was clear that a bond of some kind had formed, and the town watched in a mixture of astonishment and admiration as it unfolded. Despite the growing connection, the cowboy remained cautious.
He had learned long ago that life on the frontier offered no guarantees.
Best. Danger could appear suddenly, in the form of a storm, a runaway herd, or an unexpected confrontation. To accept the widow's plea fully meant committing not just emotionally but practically to sharing the risks of the world with another person. He understood the gravity of such a choice, and he knew it required careful thought, not hasty action. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the cowboy rode into town after checking the far fields. He noticed the widow arranging supplies outside the general store, her movements precise and steady despite the rising wind that tugged at her shawl. She looked up as he approached, and for a brief moment neither spoke. The quiet of the evening seemed to hold its breath, as though aware of the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. Finally, the cowboy spoke. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but steady. There was no harshness in it, only clarity. The widow nodded, sensing the seriousness in his tone. They moved a few steps away from the bustle of the town, settling near the edge of the trading post where the light of the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I've been thinking a lot about what you asked," he began.
And about what it would mean for both of us.
"I won't lie, I've never taken a step like this lightly. Life has taught me to be careful, to value my solitude, and to protect what I have built. But I also see something in you, a courage, a strength, and an honesty that I haven't seen in a long time." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If I say yes, it is not because it is easy. It will not be simple, and it will not be safe, but I believe it could be worth it if we face it together." Bay.
The widow's eyes widened slightly. Her heart raced, a mixture of hope and fear filling her chest.
Access. She had expected caution, perhaps even hesitation, but not this careful acknowledgement of her courage and sincerity. She had come to the town seeking protection, yes, but she had also hoped to be seen as a partner, not just someone in need. And now, the cowboy's words offered exactly that, a recognition of her strength and the potential for equality in their relationship.
I understand, she said softly.
"I do not ask for promises. I only ask for the chance to prove that I can stand beside you, not behind you. That I can be someone you can trust, as you can trust me." Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She had faced loss before, and she had learned to accept uncertainty. But this moment carried a weight she had not anticipated. The cowboy studied her for a long moment. He had seen fear in many eyes, but what he saw in hers was different. It was not weakness, but courage mingled with vulnerability. It was honesty, unhidden and unguarded, and it struck him deeply. He realized that his own walls of solitude had been built not only to protect himself, but to avoid the very connection she now offered. Pay. Instead, he wanted to see where this path might lead, and what strength they could find in each other. After a long pause, he spoke again. "Very well. I will accept your offer, not because it is simple, but because I see the value of what you bring into my life. But there are conditions. We will face challenges, and there will be moments when life tests us. We must rely on honesty, patience, and understanding, or it will not work. I will not make empty promises, and I will not pretend that danger does not exist. But if we commit to facing it together, then I believe we can find something worthwhile." The widow's eyes glistened with emotion. Relief and joy mingled with the recognition of the challenges ahead. She had asked for trust, and now she had it, not blindly, but thoughtfully and deliberately. "I accept," she said quietly, her voice filled with sincerity. "I will stand by you through danger and hardship if you will do the same." Their agreement was not celebrated with fanfare or immediate public acknowledgement. Life on the frontier was practical, and words alone were insufficient. Instead, they began to live their commitment quietly, through actions, shared responsibilities, and careful cooperation. The cowboy showed the widow the ways of the land, teaching her how to anticipate weather changes, tend to the cattle, and maintain the tools and supplies necessary for survival. She learned quickly, demonstrating intelligence, resourcefulness, and determination that impressed him every day. At the same time, the widow shared her knowledge and perspective.
She had grown up learning skills that were unfamiliar to the cowboy, from traditional remedies to strategies for navigating difficult terrain.
He listened, learned, and appreciated her contributions, recognizing that partnership was not about dominance or control, but about mutual respect and shared strength. Best. Through these lessons, their bond deepened, grounded in trust, cooperation, and admiration for each other's abilities. Their connection was also tested by small, everyday challenges. A sudden herd of cattle broke through a corral, requiring quick action and coordination. A minor dispute among townsfolk demanded patience and mediation. Harsh weather and unpredictable events reminded them of the precariousness of frontier life. Each obstacle, though challenging, strengthened their partnership. Best. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, offer support without overstepping, and make decisions together. Through these experiences, they discovered that trust was built not just through words, but through consistent action, reliability, and shared responsibility. One evening, as they worked together repairing a section of fence near the outskirts of town, the cowboy paused to look at the widow. The sun had set, leaving a soft twilight that bathed the plains in muted colors. "You've done well," he said quietly, not as praise alone, but as acknowledgement of her resilience and commitment. "I see now that courage is not just about facing danger, but about facing life itself day by day and making the choice to keep going." The widow smiled, a faint, genuine curve of her lips. "And I see now that trust is not given lightly, but earned through patience, understanding, and action," she replied. "I am learning as much from you as you are from me. Together we are stronger than we are apart." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant cry of a coyote, a reminder of the wildness surrounding the town. They shared a brief, knowing glance, an acknowledgement that life would continue to be unpredictable and that their commitment required vigilance, courage, and cooperation. Yet despite the uncertainty, there was a sense of calm between them. They had faced challenges, spoken honestly, and begun to build a foundation strong enough to endure the trials ahead. The townspeople noticed the subtle changes in the pair. Their movements, conversations, and interactions reflected growing harmony, trust, and shared responsibility. Some were impressed, others curious, and a few skeptical, but all could see that the widow and the cowboy had formed a partnership that went beyond mere convenience. It was grounded in respect, courage, and the willingness to face life's difficulties together. A rare bond in a world where survival often came first and emotions were secondary. As weeks turned into months, the cowboy and the widow continued to build their life together. They shared responsibilities, supported each other through challenges, and discovered the quiet joys of companionship. Even simple moments, like preparing meals or tending to the animals, became opportunities to strengthen their bond. The cowboy found that he was no longer content with solitude alone, and the widow discovered a sense of belonging and purpose she had not known since before her loss. Yet they also understood that partnership was not about constant harmony. There were disagreements, moments of frustration, and times when exhaustion or fear tested their patience. But even in these moments, they learned to communicate honestly, listen carefully, and find solutions together. These experiences reinforced the strength of their bond, showing that trust and commitment were built not only through agreement but through shared effort, understanding, and respect for each other's perspectives. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of work repairing fences and moving cattle, they sat together on a hill overlooking the town. The sun was low, painting the sky in warm hues, and a gentle breeze carried the scents of grass, dust, and the faint smoke from the town's chimneys. The cowboy turned to the widow, his expression thoughtful. "We have faced much already," he said quietly, "and we will face more. But I believe that what we are building together, it is worth the effort." The widow nodded, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the setting sun.
I feel the same,
she replied. "I have learned that courage and trust are not given, but earned, and I have seen that in you as well. Together we can face whatever comes, as long as we continue to stand by each other." In that moment, they both understood the significance of their journey. What had begun as a bold plea for protection had evolved into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared courage, and the quiet strength of trust. They had acknowledged the challenges of life on the frontier, committed to facing them together, and begun to form a bond that was both practical and deeply personal. And as the sun disappeared below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, the cowboy and the widow stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future might bring, together with courage, patience, and a growing sense of hope. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks slowly into months. Life on the frontier had a rhythm that could be harsh, unyielding, and at times unforgiving, but for the cowboy and the widow it had begun to take on a new meaning. Their partnership, once uncertain and fragile, had grown stronger through shared work, trust, and countless small gestures that showed care and respect. They had learned to rely on each other, to communicate without words at times, and to anticipate each other's needs in ways that made the daily challenges of frontier life manageable, even meaningful. The cowboy had come to appreciate her resilience more than he had thought possible. He noticed the small ways she carried herself with dignity, how she moved gracefully even when tired, how she spoke kindly to the townspeople, and how she approached tasks with thoughtfulness and skill. She had transformed from a stranger seeking protection to a partner who offered strength and wisdom in every situation. In turn, the widow had learned to trust his judgment, respect his experience, and appreciate his quiet, steady presence. Together they had formed a bond built on honesty, respect, and shared responsibility. One morning the cowboy and the widow set out early to check on the distant cattle. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of the plains and the faint smoke from the town's chimneys. The sun had not yet risen fully, and a soft golden light bathed the landscape, illuminating the rolling hills and distant mountains. The pair rode in silence at first, each lost in thought, but the quiet between them was comfortable, not tense. It was a sign of how far they had come, that companionship could exist without constant conversation, where presence alone was enough to create connection. As they approached the far pastures, the cowboy noticed signs of a potential problem. A section of the fence had been damaged in a recent storm, and a few cattle had wandered dangerously close to a rocky cliff. He immediately directed the widow to help guide the animals back while he worked to repair the fence. The task required coordination, quick thinking, and calm under pressure. The widow moved confidently, directing the cattle with clear, precise instructions, her voice steady even as the animals grew restless. The cowboy worked beside her, repairing the fence as quickly as possible, aware that the cliff posed a serious threat. In those moments, they were not just a cowboy and a widow. They were a team, relying on each other's skills, communication, and courage. By the time the last cow was safely back within the fenced area, both were breathing heavily, but there was a sense of accomplishment, of shared triumph over a challenge that could have ended in disaster. That evening, as they returned to town, the cowboy and the widow took a quiet walk through the streets. The town had grown accustomed to their partnership. The townspeople no longer whispered with skepticism, but with curiosity and even respect. They had seen the widow's skills, her resilience, and the careful way the cowboy supported her without overshadowing her. Slowly, the town had begun to accept that something special existed between the two, built not on romance alone, but on mutual respect, trust, and shared courage.
Back at the trading post, the couple sat together, watching the sun sink below the horizon.
The sky was painted in shades of gold, pink, and purple, the beauty of the plains stretching endlessly in every direction. For a moment the world seemed to slow, allowing them to reflect on how far they had come.
The widow spoke first. "I never thought I would find a place where I belong," she said softly.
Not just in a town, but beside someone who sees me for who I truly am. I was afraid, and I have been hurt before, but I feel safe with you, not just protected, but understood. Her words were simple, yet full of emotion, and the cowboy felt their weight deeply. He nodded, his eyes on the horizon. I have spent so many years alone, believing that solitude was safer than connection. But I've learned that life shared is life strengthened. I see your courage, your strength, and your heart. And I know now that partnership, true partnership, is worth every risk. He turned to her, his expression serious but soft. We will face hardships, yes, but we will face them together. And that makes all the difference. The widow smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She took his hand in hers, feeling the strength and steadiness that had become so familiar over the past months. Bert. Together, she echoed. It was a single word, but it carried the weight of their shared experiences, their trust, and the hope that had grown between them. Life continued to present challenges. Harsh weather, unpredictable cattle movements, and occasional disputes among townsfolk required constant attention. But the cowboy and the widow met each challenge with cooperation, patience, and understanding. They learned to anticipate each other's thoughts and actions, often completing tasks seamlessly as a team. Breath. Through these experiences, they discovered that trust was not built in moments of comfort, but in facing difficulty together, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. One particularly harsh winter tested their bond like never before. Heavy snowfall covered the plains, making travel difficult and isolating the town from nearby settlements. Supplies were limited, and the cold threatened both livestock and people. The cowboy and the widow worked tirelessly, sharing the burden of securing food, tending to the cattle, and ensuring the town's safety. Their partnership proved indispensable. Each relied on the other's strength, skill, and determination to navigate the challenges. By the time the snow began to melt, their bond had deepened even further, solidified by shared hardship and triumph. The townspeople, witnessing the unwavering cooperation and mutual respect between the cowboy and the widow, gradually came to admire their relationship. Children looked up to them, learning that courage and kindness could coexist. Adults began to recognize the value of partnership, built on trust, respect, and shared responsibility. Even those who had once doubted the widow's presence in the town began to see her not as an outsider but as an integral part of the community. As the frontier slowly shifted towards spring, the cowboy and the widow spent more time reflecting on the journey they had shared. They talked about the past, the losses that had shaped them, and the hopes they held for the future. Each conversation revealed new layers of understanding and connection, deepening their respect and appreciation for one another. They had learned that life on the frontier was unpredictable, but shared strength, patience, and trust could turn even the harshest conditions into opportunities for growth and companionship. One evening, after a long day of repairing fences and preparing supplies for the upcoming season, the cowboy and the widow sat together outside the trading post, watching the sunset paint the plains in vibrant colors. The widow leaned slightly against him, feeling the quiet reassurance of his presence. I never imagined I could feel this way again, she said softly. I thought the world had no place for hope after what I lost. But with you, I feel that hope again. In fact, I feel that I can face anything, as long as we are together. The cowboy's gaze softened, and he rested a hand on hers. I've spent so many years guarding myself, he said quietly. I never thought I could let anyone in. But you've shown me that trust is worth taking, that partnership is stronger than solitude. I see now that life shared is life made richer, stronger, and more meaningful. Begged. He paused, letting the words settle between them, and then added with a faint smile, and I see that courage can take many forms, not just facing danger, but facing life with honesty, patience, and heart. The widow smiled back, a warmth spreading through her chest that she had not felt in a long time. Together, They watched the sun disappear below the horizon, the vast plains stretching endlessly before them. It was a quiet moment, yet full of significance. They had faced uncertainty, danger, and doubt, and emerged stronger, not only as individuals but as a team, as partners who had chosen to trust and support each other. In the days and weeks that followed, the cowboy and the widow continued to build a life together. They shared responsibilities, faced challenges, celebrated small victories, and found joy in simple moments. Their bond, forged in courage, trust, and shared experience, became a source of strength not only for themselves but for the town as well. The townspeople, who had once watched with skepticism, now looked upon them with respect and admiration, recognizing the power of partnership, honesty, and resilience. As the seasons changed, the cowboy and the widow often rode together across the plains, side by side. They worked the land, cared for the cattle, and tended to the needs of the town. But more importantly, they shared life in a way that neither had expected. Fully, deeply, and with a quiet joy that came from understanding, trust, and companionship. And so, the bold plea that had begun with a single heartfelt request, "Please, I'll be your wife," had grown into a story of courage, trust, and partnership. It was a story of two people who had faced loss, uncertainty, and challenge, and had found strength and hope in one another. In the vast, unpredictable world of the frontier, they had created a life together built on respect, honesty, and shared resilience. A life that promised not only survival, but fulfillment, purpose, and companionship. In the quiet of the plains, under the endless sky, the cowboy and the widow rode together side by side, ready to face whatever the future might bring. And in that shared journey, they discovered a truth far more powerful than fear or doubt. That life, when faced together with courage and trust, could be beautiful, even in the harshest of landscapes.